Hey guys, welcome back to another Architectural Real Talk. And it's about that time of the year. Holiday season's right around the corner. A few of you guys will be probably going towards final jury, mid jury, constantly being interrupted by parties that are going to be of a grand status. We're going to be going into AIA meetings. We're going to be going into museums of fine arts, Houston or Dallas, where we're going to be constantly surrounded by architects or future architects. And these people are going to be talking about Calatrava, Zahdid. We're going to be talking about all the architectural stride that has happened over the past 2 years, or they might be talking about the new buildings that are coming out next year. And these dialogues will be over a 3-course, 4-course meal where we're going to be served caviar, we're going to be eating souffle, we're going to be surrounded by contractors, clients, and that whole atmosphere of luxury. Everyone's going to be wearing a suit or tie. We're going to be walking around looking like James Bond. And all of these notions makes us forget why we became architect in the first place, why I became an architect in the first place. And to bring this point home, I want to share a story that happened around this time of the year. And I've recently been in contact with this client that used to be my client, and she still sends me gifts. So let's go ahead and get started. So about when I was an architectural intern 1, and I had been promoted to a job captain, this is when this project came in-house. It was one of the first projects that I was going to be in charge of because it was a residential house. So I was given a property that was in Kirby or around Kirby Drive, and is pretty much the museum district of Houston. This house was around $2.5 million at that time, around 12, 15 years ago. And as we started developing this house, as we started renovating this house, one of the things that set me off very, very first was when the client said, hey, we're not going to stick with this house because the renovations are no longer making sense. We want something crazier. So let's go ahead and build it from scratch. So we ended up scrapping the whole house, which was originally bought for a substantially large amount of money. So right off the get-go, I saw the waste product being pulled off into the dumpsters, and I could only imagine like, hey, these are great bones. This is an old house. This is something we could have preserved. And as we tore that house apart, in came the new. Now, as we started building this new house, there was nothing ordinary about this house. As I talked about multiple times in my previous videos, how an ordinary house should be, like 2,300 square feet, talking about energy efficiency, sustainability, and all of those things were out of the picture. The client wanted a tub that was so large that we couldn't even find the size. We ended up building almost like a custom pool on the second floor. Because of the dynamic load of the water on the second floor, we had to place 2 I-beams in. Steel beams that brought the weight of the water down through steel columns onto the ground. So there's nothing residential about this residence. We had a bowling alley. We had a half-court basketball court. You name it, they had it. But this was for a family of 4. We'll eventually become a family of 5 by the time we finish the project. So the journey was around 9.5 months. And as we went along this process, I found to know there were so many nuances about this family. The daughter was given a custom closet for her shoes. She was given a closet for her clothes, while the boy was given a secondary entrance on the first floor so he can have women come into his room and out of his room. The house did not cater to my conservative values. It didn't cater to me, but at the same time, I'm designing it for someone else. And as I'm designing it, I was constantly given criticism. Hey, this shower needs to be able to shower 3-4 people at the same time. And here I am thinking, hey, there's only 2 of you, a husband and a wife. So I'm thinking about these notions as I'm going along. And the whole time I'm having this dilemma where I'm thinking how I'm going to push forward a design and at the same time adhere to what they want. And finally, we arrived at a design that the client loved, the client actually catered to. It had beautiful elevations. It had a great front yard. It had a great entry, a circular driveway for multiple cars, and pretty much everything was being set in stone. And at the same time, pretty much assigned me a secondary project. And this project was a senior living center. This was a senior home. It was a 68 unit that pretty much had a budget of around $7 or $8 million. And I remember going through the value engineering process on this apartment, and it kept tearing me apart because the more I felt like I was doing something for the elderly, the more I felt like I was doing something for my own grandparents, the more I felt like the government wanted less and less and less to do with this housing. The housing was a fair housing project. It had ANSI A, ANSI B units. For those who understand, the units had to have grab bars in it, had to have medical alert buttons in it to inform the clinic on the property, because this was primarily for 55 plus community. And these units were very, very small, very tight to begin with. And at the same time, as we make them tighter and tighter, try to squeeze more units in because that's what the government wanted, narrowing down the corridor to bare minimum requirements, I started to realize that we started going through this value engineering process completely in a wrong way. We went from hardwood floor, where something to be a proud apartment complex, to something that started to eventually be stripped of to bare bones. I remember going from hardwood floors to tiles, then luxury vinyl tiles. Then eventually they were like, hey, let's just switch to linoleum, which is like a vinyl floor that rolls out. And I said, no, let's take the linoleum out too and put polished concrete instead. And I remember for the lobby, we pretty much subtracted the unit right above the lobby to make it a double height space. And that corridor became almost like a balcony that looked down. There were no chandeliers in this lobby. It was standard lighting. It was just lamps that were plugged in to the outlet around. And as this project progressed, I remember the clubhouse only consisted of a small gym and a small print center and the mailroom. And that was the whole project. And I was at the groundbreaking of both of these projects. And I remember how the government treated this site. All we had to do was cut ribbons. There were a lot of news channels where we took the pictures, but we went away. For the family, it was a whole party. It was food. It was lavish, but for 4 people. And as these 68 units continued to develop, came the opening day, came for occupancy. I walked into this house. I still remember it to this day. I walked with my PM, and I was so mesmerized by the space, created heaven on earth. We walked in, and I'll describe to you, there was a chandelier above me. And right in front of me, I could see through the foyer to the living room, which looked out into a garden, which had aligned itself to a pool that eventually went to a waterfall. And you could see how vast this space was, just the sheer depth of this space. And then around it, just in the foyer alone, there was heads of deers, bears, very, very exotic goats that had multiple, like 4 or 5 different horns. And as I'm surrounded by this space, I said to my PM, I was like, I don't think I will ever be surrounded by this much money. And I only got to the foyer. The chandelier was hand-blown glass, flown in from Italy. And that was the only thing that I remember that was lighting that room. But it was in the middle of the day, and we were looking through to this waterfall. And I remember the client saying, it's not perfect. This is not it. I remember those words. He said, I can't believe you, for all the money we spent, why can't you move this window over? The window did not center itself to the waterfall. And because it was 14 inches off, had a change order for us to move that window over, which costed $30,000. The window didn't change. It wasn't damaged. We just had to cut out all of the exterior flashing, all of that, to shift the glass and the frame over. And we spent $30,000 on that. And then 2 or 3 months later, I remember walking in this senior living center, and I met this old lady, which I consider my client. this woman was being dropped off by her son to call this place her home. And she was walking around looking at and touring the place. She was like, oh, this place is so nice. We had nothing but white drywall. There was nothing new about the furniture at all. The furniture literally looked like it got dropped in from IKEA. There's nothing about it that is unique. And the counter in front of us is just a bare bone Formica counter. There's nothing nice about this thing. It's just Formica at one end and granite on the other end, because the granite pretty much shows to the storefront glass that is in front of us, that is standard 7 feet height, that this building is still a facility or an apartment. So as she walked in and she was like, oh, you're the architect. Can you tell me what unit should I get? And I remember spending so much time on ANSI A unit. And I remember spending so much time figuring out these grab bars that should be going in the restroom. And I showed her that unit and I say, hey, this unit has a view to that small courtyard that you have in front of you. And it's nothing but grass and benches. And I remember she was like, this is such a cool unit. This is on the second floor. I get to view here. And when I walk out my door, I can look down into the lobby. This is so nice. Thank you so much. Thank you for what you have provided for me. And I remember those words because I actually felt like I have made an impact. I remember her expression of awe was much grander than the expression that I got from the rich man who said that this is not it. So my advocacy, what I'm trying to say is, you as an architect has impact on your community. Do not forget that. Do not forget the society or the community around you. That at the end of the day, someone is underneath the house and he's praying that someone has provided a home or a roof over me. Thank you, God. And in that moment, you are to be thanked as well. And for those who are rich, there are great opportunities for you to explore new materiality, to innovate design. I'm not saying to not push forward design, to not spend where the money needs to be spent, to push forward design. There needs to be a Mobius house. There needs to be another falling water. There needs to be a push in the architectural boundary. But overall, those projects only fill your portfolio. What you make impact on lasts a lifetime.
Follow for more content.